Hello, glad to have you back. So, this lecture, we're going to be talking about eating behavior. And as I mentioned several times, I think it's one of the most important aspects of eating. And the reason behind that is because it just influences so many areas of life. And obviously, it affects how we feel. Because if we have disordered eating patterns or disordered relationship with food, it's going to influence our body image, how we feel after eating. For an example, if you feel shame, if we feel depressed or anxious, worried. It also influences our energy levels, and as well it influences the success level on which we start our eating habits. Whereas if we have disordered eating patterns, it's going to reduce the possibility that what we do to improve our eating habits and generally healthy habits, it's going to lessen the probability that it's going to be sustained in long term. It influences the mortality and health as well. So we have quite a lot of data around this. I think we'll talk about it in a bit. And if you don't understand what is the correlation between disordered or unfunctional eating patterns and still kind of get caught up in them all the time, you can just end up in never-ending cycle, which most of the patients, when they come visit a nutritionist, they already are in the state that they don't know what else to do, because whatever they have tried, it just doesn't work. And obviously, it's not as simple as just telling them that they should be doing it in another way. Yeah, they should be, eating more veggies or, not eating burgers or sweets. Yeah, so it's more complex than that. And as it turns out, most of the times, it's really not about the person not knowing what they should be eating. Yeah, we see that only 16% of people who were questionnaire about what's the biggest nutritional challenge, they say that they don't know what they should be eating, right? So most of the times it's not the case. Yeah, we do know, or sometimes we know actually too well what we should be doing. Yeah, so it's not the case or not the problem. But we see that such scenarios of emotional or stress eating or cravings or snackings when not hungry, they're very common. We see that, like 50, 60% of the people who are questionnaire, they noticed that these were the problems. So actually, we see that it's less about the knowledge and more about the behavior. Yeah? And again, it would be easy to say, just don't stress eat, or when you're feeling an intense emotion, then choose something else to do than eat. But it doesn't work like that. And actually, the data that I have collected also in my private practice is quite similar to this. Because the people who usually come visit me as a nutritionist, it's mostly because of emotional and stress eating, because of cravings, because of out of control eating, binge eating. Sometimes it's preoccupation with thoughts around food and the body. Often it's shame and regret after eating. And sometimes it's also very frequent snacking or unpredictable appetite. Yeah, so all of these issues is, again, it's a behavioral issue, and so we have to talk about eating psychology and how it works and why it doesn't just it's just not enough to read a good book or hear a podcast about nutrition. So the topics that we're going to cover today is about different kind of diets and the history of diets. What have we as civilization went through till this time around dieting? We're also going to discuss like the most common popular fad diets at the moment. Then we're going to move on into, again, the most common issues that people come to a nutritionist. It's emotional eating and cravings. We will talk about body weight and body image, because I think that it's Mm, it can be quite useless to work with nutritional habits when we do not approach body image and body weight. And I have to be already quite honest that we have quite a lot of stigma around this. So this topic can feel very unpleasant, or it can feel that you totally disagree with this and you have different experience. And I have collected quite a lot of data, and it can I can be quite biased, in one certain kind of team around this topic. So so keep an open mind as much as you can, but at the same time, if you totally disagree with this, you can absolutely stay in your own in your own kind of thoughts and mindsets around this. So we will talk about eating disorders as well, and disordered eating, and how to know where is the difference between disordered eating and an actual diagnosis of eating disorder, yeah, such as bulimia, anorexia, or binge eating, compulsive eating disorder. I think it can be used interchangeably, but most of the times we call it binge eating. So we'll talk about methods, how to work with it, and how I work with it in my private practice. About the method CBTE, which is called Cognitive Behavior Therapy Enhanced. Basically, a therapy that works with eating problems and eating disorders. And then we'll have a little chapter about a new area of science, which is called nutritional psychiatry. And we will talk about what we can do regarding our nutrition to improve our mental well-being and sustain it as well as good as possible. I will just change the camera a bit because the sun is shining on my face finally, but a bit disturbing. So just a moment. We'll just change it a bit here, I guess. Mm-hmm. Sorry, no flower for you guys. Okay. And let's jump into diet history. I think this is a really fun one. So in the beginning, obviously, there were most probably no diets really, because we were, for most of the times that we have been on this earth, we have been hunters and gatherers. And at that time, really, surplus energy was a rarity because we were using a lot of energy to hunt our food. And if we did have extra fat layer, that was amazing. That was very convenient. That was increasing the possibility of being alive. Yeah, so that was great, and no one was thinking about how to shred it and take part of it off. Things started to change, of course, in agricultural era, where food was accumulated and it was grown on purpose. But again, for most of the civilization, when we were working on the crops, working on the fields, we again were using quite a lot of energy, sometimes even more than we were when we were hunting. And in times of, for an example, bad weather, not enough water or too much sun, or cold weather, then it would be a possibility of actually really like a risk for starvation because the food was not enough. But at that time, there was also quite a division between other parts or other kind of civilization parts, where some of them were able to accumulate through generations large wealth. And then, of course, in that case, the food was in abundance. So we started to see the first cases of people becoming fatter, for an example. Although before that, the ideal kind of shape of fertility, maybe you have seen the statue, there was actually a woman with very large hips and very large breasts. So now probably if we would interpret it, we would call her probably obese, or very overweight. But so it was a rarity at that time, or the person would be just extremely wealthy. And I can imagine that at that time it was considered to be healthy and wealthy, or rich people could afford that. But I can imagine that for some part of the civilization as well, where they couldn't afford the food, they saw that it's also could be seen as greed, eating too much where someone is starving.